one time I think there was myself and Pushta Krishna and Achyutananda in Mayapur, and we were talking about, consciousness and whether every living being is conscious or not. And Achyutananda was trying to argue that actually they're not. The soul may be there, but the consciousness is not displayed. And he said, if you start thinking that every living being is conscious, then you'll go crazy. Because then you'll think, well, all the atoms in the floor are conscious, so if I tread on the floor, it'll hurt them, or if I close the door too hard, they'll all scream or something. So I was not really satisfied with, his reply to that. And so I went straight in to see Srila Prabhupada and I asked him about it. And then Prabhupada was able to immediately point out a verse in the first canto. And then he gave me this example of how, there's the skin and the nail. So if you cut the skin, then immediately you're hurt. But if you cut the nail, you can do that without any difficulty. So he gave that as an example of how there are different states coming from the same source, but there are different states. And therefore, everything is actually, it's Krishna. Everything is Krishna. But Krishna's energies work in different ways. So matter, spirit is actually the same, it's from the same source, but according to how it's used. So that was one question I was able to get cleared up there. I know Prabhupada wasn't very keen on our men making movies. There was a discussion that Gyanagamya had with him in Iran in August of '76, and he was very keen on that at that time of making a big commercial, full-scale movie, the millions of dollars thing. And he had this idea that somehow or another it would popularize the movement. His idea was to show some scenario where the devotees were involved and people could see how we lived and get an appreciation from that. Prabhupada dismissed it. Gyanagamya brought up 5 or 6 different angles. He was desperately trying to get a yes from Prabhupada, but Prabhupada would not give him an endorsement for it at all. And he said, for the kind of money that you're spending, this was one of the arguments that he used, he said, the kind of money that you would spend on that, he said, how many books could you distribute? He said, and I have personal experience anyway, expending so much money and getting practically no result. He said, when I first went to New York, he said, then I put an ad classified in the New York Times. So he said, at that time it cost me so much money, I had practically nothing. For one small ad, it ran for 1 or 2 days or something. He said, I got 3 responses and none of them bought my books. So he said, I have personal experience, this is a waste of time. Well, I mean, as far as movies go as well, because in India you can make movies about Krishna. And they've done it very often. But, they always want to focus in on Krishna's 10th canto, Gopi Leelas and things like this. So I remember when we were in Bhubaneswar, this was in late January and very early February of '77. So this movie maker came, 2 or 3 of them came, and they explained to Srila Prabhupada that we're making a movie. We want to popularize Krishna's pastimes. Now Hare Krishna is becoming very popular, and we want that everybody should know about Krishna, and we want to show Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. And so, we'd like, you are the guru of the Hare Krishna movement, so we would like to get your blessings for making this movie, and we'd also like to just put a little mention of our humble thanks, for the work that you've done in popularizing Krishna's pastimes on the movie. So Prabhupada immediately, told them no. He said, why do you want to immediately jump to Krishna's 10th canto pastimes? So they were saying, but Swamiji, everybody in India is a Krishna Bhakta. And Prabhupada told him, he said, nobody will understand. You'll show them and they'll take it as some mythology. Krishna killing the Trinavata whirlwind or whatever. He said, then they'll all think it's simply mythology. So then they said, but Swamiji, everybody in India, they're all Krishna Bhaktas. So the evening before, Prabhupada had had a conversation with a man who had asked him, actually, who is Krishna? Prabhupada was shocked. He's an Indian man, supposed to be educated, asking who is Krishna, and he chastised him like anything. It was in a darshan. And Prabhupada said, you're born in India, you do not know who is Krishna? And then when he had given his evening lecture, he brought it up in the lecture also, that, here we are in Punya Bhumi, in Bharata Bhumi, and now people are so degraded that they're asking who is Krishna. So now this film man came a day or two later, and he said, oh, but Swamiji, everybody's a Krishna Bhakta. Prabhupada said, you say that they're Krishna Bhaktas, but he is asking who is Krishna. So he said, why don't you make a movie of the first canto? You show that first, and then you go progressively through the Bhagavatam, and then you can do the 10th canto. But of course, they wanted the 10th canto, Krishna with the gopis and this and that. But Prabhupada would not give them an endorsement, because they were simply trying to, capitalize on Prabhupada's popularity. Oh, this movie is approved by Bhaktivedanta Swami. But Prabhupada would not give him an approval. And after about half an hour, again, they brought up various arguments. Prabhupada would not budge an inch on it. He refused. He said, if you make one of the first canto, then we'll see. I particularly remember that he mentioned on one show, there was some kind of Christian minister that was going around and really heavily criticizing us, and he was being invited to different talk shows. So he was criticizing us how we worship this man, this mythological man who had sex with 16,000 wives. And, he was trying to make out that actually the whole basis of our movement is immorality. It's a typical kind of thing that people think that Krishna is an ordinary man and that he's immoral. And so Prabhupada then very nicely, very strongly, but very expertly explained how sex desire is there originally in the spiritual world. And for Krishna, sex is not bad. He's God. He enjoys everything. So why only 16,000? He can enjoy 16 million. And for him it is not bad. But he said, for you, it is bad. He said, you cannot have sex. And, attacking. This was Prabhupada's method. He would cut them down and give, real philosophical reasons, but really punch them home as well. It was very strong. So he explained there that how, the Adi ras, that's the original form of sex desire, the original rasas that Krishna has in the spiritual world. But in the material world, when they imitate Krishna, then it becomes the most degraded. So for Krishna, what is the most highest activity, when it's reflected pervertedly in the material world, it becomes the very lowest and the most degraded. And so that was one point anyway that he explained there. And again, also, when we got to Mayapur in 77, that was just before Prabhupada got his that really bad sickness, which eventually led to his disappearance. We had been down to Bhubaneswar, and then we came up to Calcutta to stay for a month or so. And one man came from Mahesh Pandit's Samadhi, and he was a pujari there, like the Saivite, and he wanted Srila Prabhupada to come and do a program there. We knew it was going to be very small, what we would kind of consider a rinky-dink little affair, We knew it. And but Prabhupada immediately agreed to the man's request. He had come during the massage and spoke in Bengali. So Prabhupada agreed, and then he went away. But I couldn't speak Bengali, but I knew what was going on. So then I was kind of unhappy, because I knew how weak Prabhupada was by that time. And in fact, when we first arrived in Mayapur, one morning on the balcony after breakfast, Prabhupada was looking out over the fields, and then he turned to me and he said, never in my life have I felt as weak as I do now. But then he added, he said, but still I would like to finish this Bhagavatam. And I had seen evidences of Prabhupada's decrease in general health and fitness. Several times I had to literally pick him up when he collapsed on staircases. So anyway, I was just very concerned. So when this man came, I really didn't want Prabhupada to go. And so I asked him, kind of a little complainingly, I guess, Srila Prabhupada, why do you have to go? He said, no, he's asked, I must go. He said, it's preaching. So I said, but Prabhupada, there's so many sannyasis here, they can all do the program. He said, no, he wants me to go, I must go. So, because I was a bit upset by it, then Prabhupada said, just like, that story in the Krishna book about Pradyumna, he was injured on the battlefield, and so when he was taken, then immediately he went back to fight, even though he was injured. So he said that was his duty. So then I said, but Srila Prabhupada, it was his charioteer's duty to take him off the battlefield when he was sick. So then Prabhupada said, yes, and it was his duty to immediately return and fight. So he defeated me, So that was, again, it was his determination, and we did do that program. Prabhupada just simply wanted to encourage the man, and we went and we did that program. And I remember that it was, there was like a pandal, a stage, and there was some really rickety steps, about 4 or 5 steps leading up to the stage. So when Prabhupada approached that to go up, he didn't ask for help or anything. And he immediately, started stepping up one by one. And by that time, I was already aware of how weak he was. So I was standing on the step below him. As he went up one step, I went up one step. And I had my hands out like this, just in case anything happened. And Prabhupada was actually pushing himself up the steps with his cane. He had so little strength in his legs. So he put one foot up, and then to get the other one up, he would actually push himself up with this cane. So when he got to the second to top step, he was straining like anything, and then all of a sudden, his strength went, and he just collapsed. But I was right behind him, stood on the lower step, and I just caught him, and I just, had to literally carry him up to the top and put him on the stage. And I put him up there, and Prabhupada just, walked over to his seat and sat down like nothing had happened. So, Prabhupada literally sacrificed his life for us. There's no question of it. I saw it. He just wore his body out. If Prabhupada, if there was a cause for Prabhupada's disappearance, like a cause of death, the Kamis are always fond of identifying the cause of death. You could just say that Prabhupada wore his body out in the service of mankind. That was the cause of his. Je anilo premadana koruna prachu